Monday, which means it's time for our weekly box office report, brought to you by our friends at AMC Theaters.
Everybody in chat board's like, thanks, John, for spoiling Miss Universe.
Spoiler alert!
Man,
Spoiler alert!
that's really great.
You nerds are crazy. You get spoiled.
For the second time this year, the all-time opening weekend box office record has been broken. Earlier this year, Jurassic World beat out the first Avengers movie by making $208 million. Now, Star Wars The Force Awakens has beaten that by $30 million, taking in just over $238 million. Coming in a distant second place is the new Alvin and the Chipmunks movie, making $14.4 million. In third spot is the new Tina Fey, Amy Poehler comedy Sisters, which made $13.4 million. In fourth spot is the Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2, being knocked out of the number one spot for the first time in 5 weeks and making an additional $5.6 million and a worldwide total of $595 million. Rounding out the top 5 is the 7th film in the Rocky franchise, Creed, making just over $5 million. Schnepp, what stands out to you about this week's box office report?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe Star Wars The Force Awakens stands out. Yeah, 238. They're saying it's not official yet, but it's maybe going to be 247.
They're speculating. There's some speculation right now that the numbers could get adjusted.
Right.
So like the Hollywood Reporter right now is saying 247, and other people picking up on that. We're sticking with the 238 because the 238 number is what is still right now the official number.
That's official.
But by this afternoon, by the time the show ends, they might adjust that up to 245, 247. We'll have to keep our eye on it. As of right now, the official number is still 238.
But I think the other things that stand out, aside from that, and also my prediction being very almost spot on, is Sisters and the road chip or whatever the thing's called. I think it's called road chip, right?
Yeah.
That they actually made a $14 million each. That's surprising. I mean, I think that's spillover. That's counter programming where you went to the theater thinking that you can actually get into this sold out movie, and you brought your family and you couldn't get in, so you had 2 other movies to pick from. You had the Chipmunk movie or the Tina Fey, Amy Poehler movie. So that's why it's so even too. It's so weirdly even. It's like
they're less than $1 million apart.
It's just like that, just spillover. So I mean, that stands out to me, and it's cool to see Creed hanging in there. I mean, but honestly, the Star Wars news is the biggest news. It's the biggest opening ever in Christmas, and in I guess it's history now.
History,
right?
biggest opening in history, and like you're right. Honestly, here's the thing. It's going to sound weird to say, but the biggest shock to me and surprise is Alvin and the Chipmunks and Sisters, because I'm not surprised at all by the Star Wars numbers. The fact if you had told me they both would have made 14 plus, like 28 between them, I would have said you're dreaming. I would have I still thought it was a good idea. You remember back when they first announced that Alvin and the Chipmunks would be released, moved up to it. I said, hey, actually, that might not be a bad idea. But I still didn't think it would crack 10. So that's impressive. But really, look, the story here is Star Wars The Force Awakens. Whether it's 238, whether it's 240, 247, 250, whatever, we are talking about shattering a record. When Jurassic World came along, it beat the previous record, the original Avengers, by $1 million. Beat it by $1 million. As of right now, the new record beat it by $37 million and maybe up to like $46 million or 40 something million bucks that it beat it by, which is just crazy numbers. Also, it broke the worldwide opening weekend record. But think about this. It broke the worldwide opening week record without opening in China yet. It still has to open in China. Like when Jurassic World opened, and it was like the biggest opening week worldwide, it had China also. This is why, and sometimes people ask, John, how come when you guys do box office reports, you only talk about the North American box office, you don't talk worldwide? Because they open in different markets at different times. You can only compare worldwide opening weekend numbers if all the movies are opening in the same number of markets at the same time, and they're not. So all we really have to go on is, the domestic box office, and that's why when we do box office reports, we do that. But it broke the worldwide record without China. Right. Imagine how much it would have beat it by had China opened on the same weekend.
Lucas was right. I'll squash you like a bug. Squash you like a bug.
So anyway, what did you think?
I mean, well, the one thing that I found interesting also is that Hunger Games has made about $500 million
Star Wars already did that,
which is crazy.
Within a couple of days, it already did that. And I do think, because listening to Bob Iger, because like as you always say, you worship at the altar of George Lucas. I'm worshiping at the altar of Bob Iger. From what this guy has done, listening to him speak this morning on Bloomberg, and watch like the fact that he says that the projections are going to be 247. I'm pretty sure it's going to be 247. And when you look at what that movie has accomplished and all the records that it has smashed,
it could go as high as 247.
Now, for me, and being the Star Wars guy that I am, I was one of the biggest doubters. I didn't even know it was going to cross 200 million because of it being in December and Christmas time. I was beyond wrong on that. You were super close. If it turns out to be 247 here, and I think that everything that this movie has done, and I think that the drop off next week is going to be maybe even smaller than we thought, because we had spoken about a lot of people didn't get tickets opening weekend and are waiting for the rush. I'm very curious to see what week 2 is going to be like. But yeah, Road Trip to me, I think, is a more bigger surprise to me than Sisters, because Road Trip is one, like, I think that when I took my daughter to see it, that's why I look like I'm 87 years old right now. I had to endure it. But I took my daughter to see it, and there were a lot of kids in there, younger kids that maybe can't see Star Wars yet. But that I'm glad Creed's hanging in there for sure. That to me is it's kind of doing not the same type of business what Kingsman did.
But they just started doing a new marketing push for Creed as well. Do you notice they're doing a secondary push right now to get more people to it because it deserves to have an audience?
It does, and I like that it's sticking in there in number 5. So this was a really big weekend for Star Wars fans, for movie fans in general. And I think something interesting that Bob Iger said was they saw a spike I think the next day as far as movie tickets went, because when they originally sold all these tickets, they saw a big increase in guys. A lot of men were going to see Star Wars, but then when the word started to spread about Daisy Ridley, then more women started. They saw their women demographic go up as far as ticket share. So I think, to me, that is going to be something really big that continues throughout the run of The Force Awakens.
Yeah, and that's JJ. He's one of the principal guys who's like, he really pushed to have a female be the lead.
Yeah.
He said that's really important to do this new Star Wars trilogy. I think that's the way to go.
She was so good, man.
She was amazing. Man.
So here's something really interesting and scary. It's interesting and scary to keep in mind. Unlike Jurassic World, when it came out, its opening weekend box office surprised everybody, including Colin Trevorrow, including all the people who knew. Nobody expected Jurassic World to have the opening weekend that it did. Right. Nobody. So what you had everybody who wanted to see it just went to the theater. There was a new dynamic at play here with movie going this weekend because of how many people did not go, just assuming they couldn't get tickets. I mean, I know tons of people, we all know people who wanted to see Star Wars this weekend, but did not because they operated on the assumption you ain't going to be able to get near a movie theater this weekend. Because Dennis had this one conversation with somebody at the theater, I went and talked to some of the guys over at the AMC Burbank 16, the people who work there. And they said, there are still lots of our screenings are not sold out. But what you have is, because the weather hasn't been great here for Los Angeles, it's been okay. But, people, generally speaking, they don't want to go and stand in a line for 3 hours. And they didn't want to go to the movie theater to try to buy tickets because they assumed it would be sold out. So they said, all of our theaters are pretty much full, but almost all of our screenings still have some seats available. What we don't have any seats available for is the one theater they have that has pre-assigned seating. That one sold out throughout the weekend, every single screening into the week, because people didn't have to wonder if they were going to get tickets. Right. They didn't have to wonder where their seats were going to be. And I was talking to one of the guys over at the Burbank 16. They said, if all of our theaters were pre-assigned seating and people could pre-buy their seat and pre-select their seat, he said the amount of business, we would have probably had about 30% more business. Yeah. Think about that. Think about the number of people who went to go see Star Wars and how much more it might have been. It's true. This is a crazy phenomenon.
Well, look at the repeat viewings as well, too. We had always talked about this, even on Jedi Council. Right. It depends. The amount of money this movie's going to make is how good it was. And I think it has gone from good to a lot of people's minds to great to a lot of people's minds as well, too. And not a lot of oh, that was terrible. I haven't heard terrible.
A couple of weirdos.
But I heard some people saying disappointed. fine, but that's not terrible. And so we're at a good and a great level from a lot of people. And I know people that have seen it 3 to 4 times already. I'm going to see it 3 to 4 times, and we're not even out of week 1. So once more people are seeing it 4, and I keep getting tweets, I'm going to go see it a 5th and a 6th and a 7th time. That's going to continue to happen with the hardcore fans and brand new fans that are coming in too. That there are people, you got to remember, the new generation that is learning about Star Wars now, are being introduced to Star Wars through this movie. They're going to see it a bunch more times. Remember when we were younger and we were telling our parents, I got to see it again. How many times did you see the original one?
Yeah, so many times.
So many times. And as a kid, if this is the first time, it was the coolest thing ever. I saw it for a second time yesterday. I was walking out and I saw these 2 little kids. They must have been like, I don't know, 8 years old. And they're like, well, wait a minute. You think there'll be a 10, an 11, and then a 12? I got to see this one again because and you hear these 2 kids talking. I'm like, that's awesome. That's exactly what you want. Those 2 kids I saw are going to be seeing that movie a ton of times.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, this is going to sound weird. We had talked about on our review, you, me, and Tiff, we talked about this on Jedi Council actually, about does Star Wars The Force Awakens have a chance to catch Avatar for the all-time record?
Yeah.
These numbers actually convince me even more that it will not. It won't catch it. Because if you look at it this way, I mean, who knows what'll happen? I mean, crazier things have happened. It might. I hope it kind of does. But if you look at it, Star Wars The Force Awakens has just beat Jurassic World's opening weekend box office record by 15%. By 15% it beat it by. So if you extrapolate that, I think Jurassic World ended up with somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.7 billion worldwide. So if you extrapolate that 15% bigger in the long term, and that maintains long term, then you're looking at The Force Awakens making 2 to 2.1 billion. Can it pick up that much more steam to add another 30% on top of that 15% and cross the $3 billion line to beat Avatar? I still think that's a dubious proposition. I still don't think it will. I think it has a real chance to catch Titanic for number 2. But I still don't think it's going to catch Avatar because, to me, the math doesn't line up at this point unless a new phenomenon comes. But you're still feeling pretty confident that it does have a real shot at catching Avatar.
100%.
100%. Like, you're going to be shocked if it doesn't catch Avatar.
At one point, I was like, I think it could. I think it's going to do it because I get the math. But the difference is Jurassic World is not Star Wars.
No, this is true.
And it doesn't have that repeat
viewing.
Because all of us have already seen it twice.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to seeing it a third time.
Did you hear of anyone that saw Jurassic World 2 or 3 times the opening weekend?
Nope. No.
And the thing,
but I did for Avengers. And Avengers has comparable numbers to Jurassic World.
It does. Avengers, I think, is a comparison for sure. But I think that also Star Wars and the Avengers did phenomenal business. But I think Star Wars, again, for what, and Dennis said it early too, because it's got this thing of people going, it's not. It's such a different feel from the prequels. It's just so different that it takes you back to the original trilogy. That you're recapturing that it is recapturing that magic again. And I think that's why it's going to do all this repeat business. And jumping back to what we just said before, not everyone has seen it yet. In that second week, you're going to see the drop off is really what I'm curious about. So I want to see what that second week is like. If we get like a really big, let's say the final numbers for this weekend is like 245, right?
Sure.
And next week, let's say it makes 150 to 160 next week, right? If it does that, then I think we have a good shot.
Well, I said this before, I'll say it again. I believe the second week drop off is going to be around the 30% range. I think it's going to be around the 30% range. I think it is more than realistic to expect that we're going to see a second weekend. Wrap your head. How many movie theaters, how many studios would kill to have a movie open with a $150 million weekend?
Everyone.
I'm thinking Star Wars The Force Awakens is going to have a second week.
And you still
250,
even with that,
260.
And even with that, you don't think it can catch Avatar.
$3 billion is a really
China hasn't seen it yet.
I know, but you're talking China maybe will add like $90 to $100 million to the box office. $3 billion is a really we're talking about.
You think only 100 million in China?
Put it this way,
at all?
I think maybe around 100, maybe at the most 150. I think the record right now in China is like a $90 million thing. Is the current record?
Okay.
But I mean, think about it this way. Only, I think, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe only like 15 movies in history, maybe 17 or 18. Have made $1 billion worldwide, right? That's all it's ever happened.
Right.
Like that many times has any movie made $1 billion. We're talking about taking the biggest movie of the year and adding that $1 billion on top of it. Right. It would be amazing. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say I will, I'll shave my head or dye my hair pink if it did. I think it's certainly within the realm of it's feasible.
Yeah.
It's just $3 billion, man, is a really big number.
I think it's more than possible to do. When you think about Transformers 4 broke $1 billion, and that's a piece of garbage. I mean, but just had a lot of people going to see it because they're selling toys.
Right.
Now, Star Wars is also selling toys, but it's actually a really fun film. And word of mouth right now is people are not only wanting to see it a second time, but a third time and bringing their friends. So it has that phenomena that the original 1977 Star Wars has, where it's actually bringing people back into the theaters, where nowadays we live in a world where we can see any movie we want on our own, like, giant screen television at home, and we have streaming Netflix, we have all these choices, and this is a film that's dragging people back to the theater because it's a theatrical experience, and it's a really fun film. I mean, there's a couple people who are complaining about it, but
minority though.
Yeah, it's like, honestly, it's really like a really fun, exciting film to see in the theater.
You know what it also is too, going back to, let's say, Jurassic World and the Avengers, the two examples from earlier, both summer movies. Both had other big summer movies start to chip at it after a bit. Besides Kung Fu Panda 3 and a couple other things, there's not a lot that's going to be chipping at Star Wars until Batman vs. Superman. There'll be other things that can certainly take money away from it, but not at the impact of, say, a summer movie
Deadpool.
does.
There's a couple of good February, but even that's a long way away.
That's
a
February.
long way
I'm saying
away.
up until, let's say, Deadpool. Okay, so Deadpool, even because it's a rated R film as well too, they'll probably and the same audience for sure. But up until that point, there's not a lot that's going to be really taking so much away from it, because if you have the Avengers and Jurassic World, I don't remember what came out right after those movies, but I'm sure it was at least a movie that did anywhere from 50, 60, 70 million opening weekend, and that'll start to chip. So I think that's why this December, and it's also when you look at Avatar and Titanic, both movies that came out December, January, and had that time to build, because both Avatar and Titanic didn't open anywhere close to this. They had enough time to really.
Oh, they both opened sub 100 million.
Right, didn't even crack 100 million.
Wrap your head around. Avatar opened to less than 100. I
Both
think it opened like
3-hour
$77 million.
Both 3-hour movies, both in 3D, and this movie's in 3D as well. And I'll tell you, I saw it. I'm not a big 3D fan, but I saw this movie in 3D, and I was surprised how much I enjoyed it in 3D. Because I was kind of dreading watching it in 3D because I didn't think it was necessary.
See, the one thing you raise about, and we've talked about this before, is about the fact that this is an opening in the summer, so it's not going to have the same competition surrounding it. That is the one exception to this, because when I think about all the other things we've talked about, it's a theatrical experience, it's getting people back into the theater, it's people going back to watch it 5, 6, 7, 8 times. That was Avengers. I mean, that really was the Avengers when the Avengers first came out, and Avengers ended with like 1.6 billion. We're talking about coming close to doubling what the Avengers did. To me, it is still. I hope it happens.
How much did it make worldwide this weekend? Over
Almost
500 million.
Almost
So
500 million.
imagine next weekend it's 300, and the following weekend is 300. That we're gonna.
Then
it's
you're
gonna
at
crack
1 billion.
It's gonna crack 1 billion before the end of
What's
this
the
year.
fastest
but
movie
then
to
it's-
ever make
then
1
it's done
billion?
3 weeks.
What's the fastest movie to ever
That's
make
a very
1
good question. I don't know.
That's
It will be this.
This
This will be the
question.
fastest to hit $1 billion.
If you guys are out doing research, what's the fastest movie to hit 1 billion?
But I'm just saying, if it hits $1 billion before the end of this year, it's got all of January to soak up that other $1.5 billion. I think it's doable.
But remember, by that point, then we're getting into only repeat viewings of that, because like after we cross 3 or 4 weeks, now we're into things where everybody's seen it,
Right.
who's going to go see it. We'll see what that drop off is. This is going to get really, really interesting. This is a phenomenon in theater. It's funny. I had one people, why are you guys talking so much about Star Wars lately? It's like, that's like asking ESPN during Super Bowl week, why are you talking so much about football right now? This is business-wise, this is the biggest thing we've ever seen happen in the movie business. It is an incredible phenomenon that's happening right now. And now we're less than a year away from Star Wars Rogue One. So just wrap your heads around that.
Jurassic World did it in 10 days, is what they're saying.
Jurassic did it in 10 days. Star Wars will beat that.
Yeah.
Star Wars will absolutely beat that.